Welcome, this is Hallie with Handmade by Hallie. Thanks for stopping by my channel. For this project, we're going to need pumpkins of two different sizes. One flat one with a stand, some flowers of different colors and sizes. This is optional. Some ribbon, whatever coordinates with the paper or fabric you're going to use for these pumpkins. Some scissors, a glue gun, some jute, and of course your Mod Podge and a paintbrush. These are going to be what we need. Let's get started. So the first thing that I'm going to do is remove anything that was on these pumpkins. Then I'm going to choose which paper is going to go on which pumpkin, and I'm going to trace to give the rough outline of the pumpkin, and I'm going to roughly cut this out. The only place I'm going to be particular is about the top where the stem attaches, and I do this to both of them. I want to use that pumpkin stack on the one end of the paper, and because this has the stand, I have to put it at the end of the table to trace that line, and again roughly cut. And so next I'm going to put a liberal amount of Mod Podge, get it all even. I got the tag off as much as I could. It's not going to really matter. Gonna spread out smooth out the paper, and then repeat the same thing for the larger pumpkin. Again, a lot of Mod Podge. You want to make sure that this adheres really well. Get it nice and smooth, then put your paper on. Sometimes you have to move your paper over just a little bit, and then set that aside to dry. After that's dried a bit, I'm going to go ahead and put a layer of Mod Podge on the top to seal the paper from getting scratched or cut. If you get any bubbles, you can put a pin and pop the bubble and then rub gently to get the bubbles out. Here I take my finger and make sure I've got any bubbles smoothed out, and I do that top coat on both of the pumpkins. Put plenty on there because you want to seal that paper really well. While those are drying, I'm going to show you how I'm going to make the bow for the top of the larger pumpkin and the smaller pumpkin. And I do end up going back in and making a smaller bow for the top of the larger pumpkin. Because when I got it all put together, the larger one was a little bit too large and it was hiding everything. So for these, I'm just measuring out my ribbon to the length that I want, and I'm making everything almost the same length. I can trim them down later when I get them cut the way I want. And I'm using the orange, the plaid, and this green, and I like the combination of these colors because these colors are in the paper with the multiple pumpkins on it. So what I'm doing is taking these wired ribbons and cutting off the wire. I want this to be a real informal looking bow, and so I'm cutting off the wire. I could probably find ribbon that doesn't have the wire, but I've already got it, so we'll just use it. And then I'm dovetailing the ends and stacking these together, taking the edges off the orange, and then the orange I'm cutting in half and I'm stacking those together, and these ones I'm just cutting at an angle. And I repeat it for the second piece of orange. Dovetailing or cutting at an angle just gives your ribbon a finished designer kind of look. So same thing with the green, taking off the wired edge, and because this ribbon is narrower, I'm just leaving it as is and not cutting it in half. So then I'm going to take some jute and measure that to about the length of what I've got stacked. About 4 to 6 times I wind that around and put that in the middle. Then I'm going to take another piece of jute to wrap around the middle. So I pinch it, put it around the back, and then cross over the top and turn it over and tie that tight. And then I can cut off those ends, and there we have a little bow. And I believe I go in here and I trim those tails down to proper size, and then that one is finished. Now that our paper is dry, I'm going to take an X-Acto knife and cut along the edge. Because I put the top coat on the paper, it's not going to sand really well unless I've got it almost all the way down to where I want it. So I went with this option rather than just sanding the edge. And so you see I get that all cut. Then I take the sandpaper and make sure I've got all the leftover pieces. And then I'm going to do the same with the other pumpkin. Again, taking that X-Acto knife and just cutting around the side of the pumpkin and then sanding it just a bit to get the rest of it off. Be careful not to sand too hard. You do that and you can actually rub off the paper. So I decided I wanted to paint the edges of these pumpkins. So I just took some Waverly chalk paint in black and painted the edge. I decided to try and wipe it off and see what that would look like, and I decided no, I didn't like that, so we'll go back and add on what I wiped off. Most of it was already dry because I'm using a dry brush method, and so I'm going to repeat that step on the larger pumpkin. And you know, sometimes crafting is a process, and as you're doing your project, you have an idea, you have an issue maybe that arises. Part of what happened with the larger pumpkin is I rubbed too hard in a spot or two and the paper kind of rubbed off. So I had a couple spots and I thought, oh, I'll just paint over all of the edges, and unless I tell you that I messed up, you wouldn't know. But I told you, so now you know. So I really like the way that these look with the edges painted black. So I decide that I want to get a fine tip brush and do a little bit of additional painting and give the lines and kind of give it a 3D effect. And this isn't very hard. You just think about the way a pumpkin looks, and it's got kind of an eye shape in the middle and a couple other lines on the each side, and just paint away. It is only paint, and it is on the Mod Podge, so if you really needed to, you could wash it off and start again. So the next part that we're going to do is take the jute and wrap that around the stems. So what I've done is put some glue at the bottom on both the back and the front, because that's where I want the jute to start, is right up next to that paper. And so as I'm wrapping this around, I'm pushing the jute as close together as I can get it. And I left this part slower so you could see what I was doing. And then I put a line up the center to kind of hold everything as I'm going. And once the bottom part is done, you just kind of wrap and keep pulling everything down as you're going. Add more glue if you need to. And then the top is a little bit trickier. I added some more glue on the top, and you kind of have to hold it as you go. And so then there I am, adding a little bit of glue, wrapping that around, getting it to where I want it to be, cutting it off, and then adding some more glue to secure that on the back side. So I'll show you that again here on the other pumpkin, and I think that looks pretty cute. Gives that a finished effect. So same thing, I'm going to add glue at the bottom on both sides. So first I add it on the back because that's where we're going to start, and then on the front. And this one, because I can stand it up, I do that. It makes it a little bit easier to wrap around. So you'll see this part from a different angle. And to get the first part wrapped in there, it takes a little bit of being particular. Once that's started, you add your glue and just wrap away. And keep adding glue as you need to. And the top part needs a little bit of more glue to make sure that everything stays in place as you're wrapping. And then same thing, when you get it all wrapped and you get it where you want it to, you're going to cut the jute and then put the end of the jute down into that glue and hold it for a moment. So now we're going to stack these together, and I decide that the bottom of the large pumpkin needs a little bit of it cut off. So I score it a couple times, take my pliers and move that back and forth, and that comes off pretty easily. Then need to trim the paper just a little bit in order for it to stand on that stand. And now it will stand and not be kind of wobbly. So now that I have that all aligned the way I want to, I'm going to put lots of glue on the back of the one with the stand, get my larger pumpkin in place, and then hold it. Now that we have these put together, we can add our bows. So you just add some hot glue to the back of the bow, press that in place, and I did that with the second bow. And so now I'm adding a little bit of greenery, either behind the bow or in the bow, and then I'm going to add some florals, some flowers of a couple different types. And what I like to do is go around and put the different layers in and not glue it until I'm all done. So you see I'm just going around lifting up the tails of the ribbon and tucking those underneath so you don't see where they're hiding in there. And I think the flowers and a little bit of greenery just add a little bit of that fall touch. There are sunflowers in the front pumpkin, and while these flowers aren't sunflowers, they are yellow, so they kind of pick up those sunflowers and make you kind of notice those. So when I'm done putting all the flowers and greenery in, I will just lift up the tails and put some glue on top of each of the flowers and greenery to make sure it stays in place, and then we will be done. If you're enjoying this video and you are finding value in what you're learning, please hit that subscribe button. Help me to get more followers and get more watch hours. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you. So this pretty much wraps up our project. We have all the flowers in, and this is what it turned out to look like. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.